Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jan Gustafsson. This is Spanish #1 Grandmaster Paco Vallejo. We are trying to understand the intricacies of the Berlin. And in this video, Paco, you're going to talk us through the white plans and options for his pieces, which are more limited than the black plans. Is that correct?
Hello, Jan. Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we spoke about the black's pieces and black's plans and structures and everything, it's very complex. But white doesn't have so much, actually. They basically have, let's say, 2-3 plans. And, well, the most obvious of them, all of plans, is to play h3, g4.
And then later f4 and gain space on the king side.
On the king side. And the other typical plan is to reach some e6, maybe with this, let's say with rook e1, knight g5, or knight d4, of course, if the knight is not on f5. That are the two main plans, and well, apart from that, he of course needs to choose where to put all the pieces because it's all very subtle. But let's say the main goal of white is to create something on the king side, because on the queen side they have nothing to achieve there basically.
Another plan, well, this is more in theory because black normally doesn't let it happen. In the black video we spoke about don't exchange his bishop. Another plan for white would be to exchange all the pieces because black has a double pawn and the less pieces remain, in theory, the better white's chances are because a pure pawn ending would be winning for him. But you don't see this happening much yet.
Well, it's easy to escape with black pieces, especially the bishop on c8. It's hard to catch him somehow. I mean, unless he goes on e6 and you manage to change him from g5 or from knight c3, knight e2, and knight f4, and then you can change him on e6. Unless this happens, it's hard to catch this guy. Yeah, that's true.
And then one thing white has going for him is his pieces. Well, he managed to castle, so his pieces are more coordinated as of now. So sometimes if black screws up, white can generate an initiative because his rooks can come to the center quickly, can double his rooks on the d file, while the black king, well, black still needs a lot of maneuvering before his rooks are connected. But in practice against a skillful Berlin player, you don't see it happen that often that the white pieces alone win the game.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it all, as we said with black, I mean, it all happened according to the black king. I mean, it depends where it goes, to e8 or c8. But as you mentioned, I mean, yeah, there will be a check on d1 sooner or later, and then you need to choose with black. And when this happens, then you need to choose what to do. But as we said before, there was this move rook d1, very interesting. But you don't really want to move this rook because your plan is basically to go h3, g4, f4, f5, and you want to have this rook on f1. So rook d1 is good because you force him to go to e8, but on the other side, it has a drawback as well.
Yeah, so ideally you would want the other rook there. So let's go through the pieces one by one. I think the easiest, it's not a piece, but I'll start there because on the right side, this pawn, it only has one career normally, right?
Well, of course, I mean, it's rare to see this pawn going somewhere else that is not h3.
Yeah. Nowadays, even the main move in this very position is to advance this pawn immediately, so that shows how highly they value the move h3, preparing g4, controlling the g4 square, so there's never any bishop g4. h3 is always useful.
Yeah, and it's rare to see it happen, but I've seen it. When the knight goes to g6, there is some possibility to go h4, h5.
Yeah,
but that's already science fiction a little bit.
Right,
it's true.
Then
so,
yeah,
h3, g4. So as you mentioned, h3 is it's a move. Yeah. Even now, I mean, you can go h3, and well, the pawn mobility, we spoke about it. You want to move all the king side. About the queen side, you don't try to touch it too much unless you want to do something very specific. For example, in some cases, if you want to bring, for example, the rook to e1 and your knight on c3, you want to play a3 because you don't want to allow bishop b4 and you don't want to let him change this bishop. If you want to go with the bishop to b2, of course, you will need to play b3. And, well, this will be a very good square for the bishop, but on the other side, it will weaken the f4 square. So it's often seen that the knight goes to g6 and then to f4 when the bishop goes to b2 here.
Yeah, well, we're on this bishop. It has two career paths, right? One is to go to b2, as you mentioned, we see that in many lines. The other is to go, no, actually 3 career paths. Yeah, I was going to say to go to f4, but it also happens in many lines that it goes to g5, especially in lines where black plays h5 and is exchanged for this guy.
Yeah, well, but as you said, this g5 square is not so logical in general. b3, bishop b2 makes lots of sense because when you go e6, the bishop will be pressing very hard on the king side, and f4, this square makes lots of sense, especially when the king is on e8, because the c7 pawn can be a target. So it actually doesn't make much sense to go to f4 if black's king is on c8. That's important.
And this choice is often a very tough one, even for the world's best players. I remember I was talking to Fabiano Caruana. He said he had played 2 games in a particular line against Magnus Carlsen, where he had gone bishop to f4 and got nothing. And then he decided in that line he has to try to play b3, bishop b2. And he won the last game, but it's very tricky, and often this is a key decision for white's strategy if he goes with b3 or bishop to f4. What other pieces do we have? We have the knight on b1. That pretty much always goes to c3, right?
Yeah, I've seen only, well, I played this Spanish Grandmaster, Vladimir Kramnik, and he loves to go to d2, but I'm still wondering why.
Well, there's 1 line or 2 where it happens, let's say, I don't even know how you get there, but just as an example, after bishop e7, what's going on here?
Yeah.
We might have a technical problem, maybe not. 1 second. Oof. Gotta love it when the monitor switches to standby in the middle of a video, but now we're back. Anyway, what I was going to say is, I'm not sure if this is a theoretical line, but it sometimes, very rarely can happen that this knight goes here, or let's say takes.
Yeah, actually this makes
Knight
sense.
d2, but
this is one of the ideas why they don't go knight c3 so quickly.
A bit of history is knight c3 used to be the overwhelming main move here, but recently white has started going h3, and the reason is in 1 line or 2 it could make sense to go knight d2 or even c4.
But only when your knight has been changed already.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to go knight d2 when you still have a knight here, because I might not change it on h4, and then you'll be...
It's just in the way on d2.
Yeah. Then you'll need to go to e4, but then it will be more flexible to have it on c3.
Yeah.
So basically you go to c3 always, and from there, well, you can wait for black to play c5, then you can try to go to d5, or you can try to go to the king side via e2 or e4.
One plan I've seen often is this knight e2 and trying to go all the way to h5 actually. Knight e2, knight f4.
Yeah.
There it supports the e6 advance if that materializes, and if not, sometimes the knight on h5 can be quite cramping for black.
Especially if he reaches h5 and then you combine it with, let's say, b3, bishop b2.
Right.
It's a very strong combination because you can threaten g7 and you control the f4 square, so the bishop on b2 has no drawbacks, because normally you have the problem with the f4 square, but if you have a knight on h5, it's much better.
Yeah.
But anyway, it takes lots of tempo. So
Also, black is not always going to let it happen. Black goes knight g6, so he goes h5 once your knight is prepared to jump there. So it doesn't happen often, but it's an interesting idea.
And from e4, you basically have similar ideas, knight g3, knight h5, but you also control c5 square, or even can jump to g5 early, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a nice square, but sometimes the knight ends up standing there doing not so much, especially if black gets in his plan with b6, c5, king goes to c6, then the knight can look a little silly on e4 sometimes.
Yeah, and if black wants you not to go to d5, then it's possible to go knight e7 first and then c5 at some point.
Right.
So you cannot jump immediately to it. Because normally if you go c5, let's say knight d5, and then you put the pawn on c4, and then it's quite... I mean, it's easier to, when you have this kind of structure, to go h3, g4, and to advance on the king side, because you blocked the center, and it's quite interesting. So, yeah, this c5 move is always...
Very double-edged, very tricky, the timing. So yeah, that knight is clear, the bishop is clear. The rook on a1, I think it mainly wants to go to d1, maybe in some cases even to e1, if white manages to get in his h3, g4, f4. Can go to e1 to support e6,
Yeah,
but typically it goes to
the
d1.
only problem of this rook to d1 is that you would love to play it right now.
Of course.
And then to keep the rook on f1. So, but if you start with knight c3, for example, you still need to move the bishop and then to go to d1, and it's already too late.
King is already gone.
Yeah, the king is already gone. So that's why some people go rook d1 to force the king going to e8. So basically, but you're gonna go to d1 with this rook. It's rare to see a4, a5 happening. I've seen it, but it's rare. Yeah. So you basically want to go to d1.
So that's the white plans really. The big plan is this h3, g4, grabbing space on the king side. Another big plan, as you mentioned, is to prepare e6 by whatever means necessary, rook e1, knight g5, and even sometimes as a pawn sacrifice to open up the position for a bishop on b2. But yeah, the white plans are limited, but that of course doesn't mean that he's worse. It also means his pieces are already better coordinated and black has a ton of way to try to make sense of his, while white's pieces already make some sense. And yeah, did we forget anything?
Well, we can speak a little bit about the king on g1.
Okay.
And I'm not sure we spoke about the knight on f3.
No, but because I thought, yeah, it doesn't.
Well, the
just
knight on f3, you want to remove it at some point, normally to d4 or g5, to push the f4.
Right.
I mean, to push f4. So basically, well, knight g5 is the ideal square, but it's often covered by h6 or bishop e7. And if this doesn't happen, I've seen this knight going to h2 to e1. I mean, even Anand, I've seen him doing something strange. But normally, if you go to e1 or h2, something's going wrong. I mean, it doesn't really mean that you're doing very well.
What also often happens to this knight is it gets exchanged for the f5 knight, especially, yeah, in this, what's the line? This theoretical line, king e8, h3, h5. I don't know, theory, let's say here.
Yeah, at some point.
Should e7 and knight h4 is coming. This is a very typical line. Yeah, don't quiz me on the right order of things, but this is quite typical. And black, well, he freed the way for this pawn, but he's fighting against g4. And f4 alone you can survive, especially if you get a bishop to f5, right?
Yeah, well, I don't have much to add to that, actually. Well, if white manages, let's say, to play knight e4, bishop g5 and change this bishop and get his knight to g5 without any possibility to take him away, then it will be good. But of course, as you said, bishop f5 is a move that black will always have once they removed the knight on f5. So the bishop on f5 is gonna press on c2 and attack e4 and square also. So it's all very, I mean, it's a game where you...
Very delicate stuff.
Yeah, very delicate. And, it depends on the plan of black pieces, you can do something or not with white.
Sometimes in these positions, once again, I'm not sure about the move order, you see something funny like white tries to avoid this exchange and black goes back to f5 and white doesn't have anything better than going back to f3 because his knight only has limited squares. Like here it's a bit silly and on e2 it's a bit silly. So yeah, this knight doesn't have a great career ahead of him. It has to get away to start the white main plan.
Yeah, and for last, I would mention the white king, which is of course much worse comparing to his...
Well, safer, but it's far away from the action.
It's very far away from the action. And the only possible plan is when you play g4, and okay, let's say something like that, 97, and once you play g4, if black wants to go h5, you'll have problems on g4, so you can start with a move like that, king h2. Yeah. That's a smart thing. I've seen Leonel Dominguez, for example, doing that. And you want to play g4, and after h5, let's say, okay, any random move, let's say here, and there is this idea, h5, king g3. Well, it's a smart thing, because you can later remove the knight and go f4, f5, and from g3 you control basically all the important squares, like h4, h3, h2. So that's the only plan that the white king has.
Yeah. And, well, you mentioned the subtle king h2. Sometimes, especially if black doesn't move this knight, you can also go more directly. Let's say this, I'm not sure if this is a theoretical line, but
yeah,
often there's this idea, you go g4, the knight moves, and then you go king g2 to prevent this h5, which if you play a careless move, let's say b3, then often h5 can be very unpleasant. So you want to be ready for this by going king g3 against it.
Yeah, I think that's basically all it is. That's
all there is.
Pieces. it feels a bit disappointing to speak about white's plans because it's not so complex as black's possibilities. So it's kind of easier to play with white, I think.
Well, the good thing is if you manage to get in one of white's plans, especially if you manage to get this h3, g4, king g3, f4, you can often be winning, like get the pawn to f5, or if e6 comes, it's often very powerful. Like, okay, let me make up a new line. Okay, I'm not sure how to do this sensibly.
Sensibly is very difficult.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I'm not sure even here how powerful it is, but let's say you get something like this, the position opens up and all of a sudden this king does become a target. You have bishop f4, you can always get rid of the black bishop pair, and things can get very dangerous for black if white manages to bring all his pieces. But of course, first of all, I'm not sure how bad this position is, but you get the idea.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, we mentioned that plan and it's one of the main white's ideas, and if you combine it with b3, bishop b2, or even with bishop f4, in any case, if you get e6 with the good conditions, you can really be clearly better.
Right.
So yeah, I think basically that's all the pieces.
That's all there is. Thanks for watching. We'll be back.